Hi there, this is Joanna, and today we are going to go into number 2 on the list, this way, which is ADHD. Now, you may have heard of ADHD before. That is when you have kids that can't sit still in class, and they run around a lot, and they don't pay attention, right? It's a learning disorder, except that it's not. It was originally thought to be a learning disorder that only occurred in children. However, when they actually were able to dig further deep into everything, that's not what it is. It's a neurological condition, which simply means that I neurologically am wired differently than a neurotypical, right? Which is like a regular person, I guess, is what you could say about it. Now, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. The better way to describe it is Attention Deficit Hyperfocus Disorder, which is the one that I prefer. They used to say there was an ADHD, which was the hyperactivity, and an ADD, which meant there wasn't any hyperactivity, but you had everything else, right? But they got rid of the two terms because it's not a separate disorder, so it doesn't need two names. But they stuck with the word hyperactivity when hyperfocus is a better word, in my opinion. Because people hear hyperactivity and they think running around, right? Somebody moving all over the place. But it's not everything that it is, right? So yeah, basically, I have a different brain development. It's wired differently. They characterize it by saying, the inability to sit still, lack of self-control, and it can affect all kinds of different things like school, relationships, work, right? But it used to be believed that you would grow out of it, except that because it's a neurological disorder, very similar to autism, and can actually share a lot of the traits as autism does. You don't turn 18 and suddenly have your entire brain rewire. That's not how it works, right? So it doesn't go away. People perceive it going away because people who have ADHD, like people with autism, we have to learn to live in the world as it is with people who are completely different than us. And so we see what they're doing and we mirror it, right? So if everybody else is laughing, we'll laugh. If people look sad, we'll look sad, right? But most of the time, we have like a mask. You're not seeing what we would be like if we were free to be ourselves. I myself both have masks and don't. With the mix of conditions I have, combined with my personality, I guess, a lot of the things I don't mask with, and there are other things that I have to mask with. Like, for instance, one of my children said he doesn't cry like other people. Now, he can cry. He's had problems with his tear ducts in the past, but the problem is they generally get clogged, and then we need to, do things to get them unclogged, right? So he has functioning tear ducts. He just never cries. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you what to do, because this comes up more often than you would think, where people are crying. I said, what you do is when everybody else takes a Kleenex, you take a Kleenex. So we got our Kleenex, okay? I said, like, you can hold it, you can play with it. Good, you got something you're allowed to play with, right? Something you can fiddle with. But I said, but every once in a while, just go. You can do the other eye. And that's all you have to do. And he figured that was pretty great, because when you don't mirror what other people are doing, they get uncomfortable. And so that's one of the things I learned, because now this is going to sound somewhat sexist and very generalized, but women cry at movies. I'm not saying all women, but it's a thing. It's a stereotype for a reason. And when you are in a group with your friends and they're all doing something and you're not doing it, you feel like you're being judged. Right? Whether they're doing it or not. So you learn how to mask. You learn how to get away with that, right? And so ADHD, you mask good. So the problem becomes when people get older, they learn survival techniques, they learn masking, they learn how to live in a neurotypical world so well that they pass for neurotypical. So until they understood ADHD better, they thought it only happened in kids because kids didn't know how to appear normal. So anyway, with ADHD, there are a lot of odd quirks. And some people might call them, there are a lot of frustrating things. There's a lot that goes on with ADHD. And not everything fits in the broken down mold of this is what ADHD is. But because we're in the world that we are now, I'm actually able to experience what other people with the condition are experiencing. And if you're ever curious about like ADHD, go on TikTok. There are a lot of people doing things about ADHD on TikTok. There is a particularly funny guy who I think he's in his 20s, and he hits the nail on the head all the time on a variety of different symptoms and different things that become associated with ADHD. And he talks a lot about like executive dysfunction. He talks a lot about following the dopamine, which I think is an awesome thing to say, because our brains don't produce dopamine the same way a regular brain does. So we really need to like do things to make ourselves happy, right? Like we need to do things to get that dopamine. So a lot of people are saying like follow the dopamine, and that's something I've been doing lately. Instead of trying to like stay on one task and get one thing done and do the thing, I've been following the dopamine, and I don't like. It seems to be helping a lot because I am doing things and getting them done. Whereas before I was trying to do like a very specific task. Like I kept trying to clean the work section of my desk because I needed to get the work section of my desk done so that I could do the things for Nishka Rose, so that I can make the jewelry and get that stuff done. And like I kept trying to do that and I couldn't. And I couldn't get started and I'd get overwhelmed and I didn't even know where to start. And so one day I looked at sort of like the private area of my desk where I kept like personal belongings instead of like work related stuff, right? And I went, I really want to do something about that. And so I did. It doesn't look like much. It still looks crazy and chaotic to other people. People are still going to go, your house is a mess. It's part of the diagnosis, actually. But I try. But anyway. So, like, I'm actually getting things done for once. So, it's been very beneficial for me, at least, to go on TikTok and listen to people talk about ADHD. And there are people on there who are psychologists, there are people on there who are counselors, there are people on there who are adults with ADHD, there are people on there who are kids with ADHD, and everybody's talking about it. And we're learning similarities that aren't necessarily in the diagnosis, but so many of us have it similar, right? And it's so nice to hear that I'm not even more abnormal, right? So, I don't know. We're at an exciting time because we're learning more and more about this. And it's the same with autism because they're learning more and more about it. And it hasn't been how to control people with autism like it used to be. It's how do these things work so that we can understand it and we can work with it instead of forcing us to work how the world works. Because I don't work how the world works, right? But yeah, so we're going to talk about my ADHD. Now, I was diagnosed somewhat young. I was diagnosed in grade 4. So I don't know what age that is because time is one of my issues. But it was in grade 4. And I remember because they sent me because they thought that I had dyslexia because I couldn't read from a book. Now, if I could have spoke to them and organized the thoughts and found the words, because obviously I speak English, I do know the language, but I struggle with finding the words. Anyway, like if I could have found it, like I would have told them it's not that I can't read. I can read the page just fine. The problem is talking, which I'm a kid who you could never get to shut up. They wouldn't have suspected talking was the issue. But saying things like this and reading off a page is very different. And sometimes my brain stalls. My eyes will go from the one line and skip like all over the page. So I might read you the things, but you're not necessarily going to get the words in the right order or the sentences in the right order just because I couldn't keep track of them. And a bigger problem that is very common with people with ADHD, when reading in a classroom situation like that, everybody else is reading way too slow. So I'm already 5 pages ahead. And I don't know where you want me to read from. Because you're going to have to tell me, So, like, those were my issues. But they didn't know that, and because I wasn't able to read it out loud, I was sent for testing. And instead of having dyslexia, which is what they thought I had, everybody was shocked to find out that I had ADHD. Now, I was the type of child where if you put me on a chair, I would not leave from it. I never got up. I never wandered around. I would stay in that chair until you came back and said it was okay to leave. Um, but that also has a lot to do with my background that has caused other issues where I was just scared to get in trouble, and I didn't want to get off the chairs, right? So, like, they weren't seeing the signs of ADHD because I was already having other issues that they weren't aware of, right? So, surprise, it's ADHD. But then they were gone, nah, she sits just fine. It's like she's not hyperactive, she's not running all over the place. She's got ADD. She's got ADD, right? Yeah, she's got to be ADD. And back then, it was in the 90s, early 90s, it would have been 91. I remember that continuously because my principal at the time, whom I really liked because he talked with me all the time, had made a comment about how it was, I don't remember the word for it, but it's the same front and back. So it was 1991, right? And back then, if you had ADHD or ADD or ADHD, um, there were no accommodations made. It didn't really change anything. They'd sort of give your teacher a heads up of, hey, this kid's got this. Um, Nothing was done. Now I'm hearing of things like getting longer for testing because it takes our brains longer to process the information. So, like reading the test question. And even something as simple as that would have gone a long way in my schooling, I think. Because it just got to the point where any kind of testing would make me physically ill. Like I was allergic to testing. First, my eyes would start watering, then my nose would start running, and it was like I had a really, really bad cold. And then I'd start feeling really, really sick, and my stomach was all gross. And I just felt like I was going to throw up, which is anxiety that was brought on because the ADHD wasn't being treated properly, right? So, I mean, like, I guess maybe they didn't know back then, but now I hear that things are a lot nicer. With my own children, only one of them got tested for it. He got the diagnosis. He was medicated for many years. It was likely the wrong medication. Um, Although we saw outward improvements, he felt it didn't help, and so he ended up wanting to go off the medication, which I supported wholeheartedly because if you don't want to put the medication into your mouth, I'm not going to force you because that is also a problem from my past. I would literally be pinned down every morning, physically pinned down to the floor by a man who's over 200 pounds, and have the pill thrown in my mouth until I swallowed it. Like he would hold me there until I swallowed it because I would not take the pills because the pills made me uncomfortable was all I could say. The pills made me uncomfortable. And my mother was saying she has behavioral issues now. But the problem was they were giving me Ritalin and I had like an early onset bipolar disorder, and so what they were doing was giving me medication that specifically triggered manic behavior, and that's why the pills neither worked nor were particularly good for me at all. But anyway, so like I have trauma and issues with taking medication. And so if he didn't want a medication, I said, fine, don't take the medication. And so he went off of it, and now he figures he's normal, right? But like he's still got it. And the second one was quiet because he has trauma and anxiety. Uh, and so they never saw it, they never tested him for it, and I think he's got it a lot worse than his brother ever did. Um, because I'm seeing all the bad things. But so if you suspect like you might have ADHD, if you look into some the symptoms and things like that, if you want to get tested, by all means like get tested, tell them what's happening, what's going on. And as long as you find a doctor who actually knows and understand it, it's good. And being treated for it is so beneficial. So beneficial to get proper treatment for the ADHD because it makes it so that like your brain slows down and you can actually do things, right? So I mean like there are benefits to the medication, and I am on a medication that is supposed to help somewhat with ADHD that is not a stimulant, and it is seriously nowhere near enough. But I don't like to fiddle with my medications too much because I don't want to unbalance anything. Um, but so currently I am basically unmedicated for it. So you would probably see watching videos, you'll see issues of the ADHD, like nonlinear thought. I can't go from one point to another. It's like a wavy line. So it takes me a while to get to the point, but I eventually get there. That's one of the things of ADHD. Stuttering, stalling, inability to like form your thoughts, form a sentence. Like those are probably the biggest things. A lot of people with ADHD have sensory issues, very similar to how uh, um, autistic people have sensory, or some autistic people have sensory issues. Um, for me, it feels like my nerves are generally on fire. Like I can feel the synapses or whatever it is firing. Feels like electricity going through all my limbs. Um, I'm very sensitive to touch. I'm very sensitive to like taste, smell, hearing. Everything is heightened, on alert all the time, and it's exhausting. And with ADHD, it's not that we can't focus, it's that we can't prioritize. So, like when say I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the camera. I'm seeing literally everything on the desk. And if anything wasn't quite right, my brain would fixate on that. And it wouldn't stop about it. It'd be like, oh, that tool's in the wrong place. Oh, the tool's in the wrong place. Oh, I gotta put it. So and until you fix it, it's just there. Or if you have a tag on your shirt and you're like, oh God, it feels like sandpaper and it just keeps touching me and touching me and touching me and touching me and I just want it gone. You know, it's like, and now perform a task while your brain's fixated on that. You can't, right? So I mean, like that's part of the problem with ADHD. Like we can't filter the information, we can't process the information, and we can't prioritize the information. So something I'm noticing by being exposed to other people who are around it is a lot of people do the exact same things I do, and I didn't realize that's why I was doing it. See, I know that when I go outside my house, I get anxious. I know when I drive somewhere and I get outside my car, I get anxious, and to the point where it brings on like severe anxiety. And then the littlest thing will set you off and now you're in a full blown panic attack, right? Or it's just it snowballs. And so one of the things that I do is I have earbuds. They're little skull candy earbuds, right? And I put them in, and they're sound canceling. And I put on my music. I have many pre-made playlists, and how I'm doing that day will dictate what playlist I listen to, right? Because I got like my biggest ones. I got one. It's called FMV. It's fan made video. It's from different fan made videos I have. Different or it's songs from different fan made videos, right? That I really enjoyed. And that's for a I'm having a pretty good day, right? And then I have a playlist called Panic. It is almost 200 songs that I really enjoy and should block out what's going on around me. And it's for when I'm having a panicky day, right? So it stops me from having like the panic attacks or an anxiety attack, right? So that's my playlist, Panic. It's very easy to find. And for the worst days, and I'm talking like the worst of the worst days, where like literally if somebody looked at you wrong, you're going to break down and cry, or just stop being able to speak, and you'll shut down. And ironically, that one's called Thai style because it's entirely music from Thailand. It has like Tilly birds in it. It has different original soundtracks from different shows and stuff that I like. None of it is in English. There might be like two songs. There might be like two songs, but they're Thai bands. But it's called Thai style. It's my playlist, and it's 107 songs that are completely Thai music. And with them, and I'm listening to it right now while I do this. With them, they're not in English. So it doesn't matter if I get the words wrong, if I sing along, because I like to sing along. You know? And it's all music that calms me. So that's the one I put on for the worst days, is Thai style. And I have speakers like throughout the house. I have like the Google speakers, whatever. So I can put on different speakers if I need it at home. Because some days I'm having such bad days that I use it at home, and I can have that music throughout the house basically. But apparently that's something that a lot of people with ADHD seem to be saying that they do when they go out in public, and specifically grocery stores, because there's so many people and there's so many different voices, and it's like a chorus of singers, but none of them are singing the same song, and your brain doesn't know where to focus or where to go, and you then can't concentrate on what you're doing. There's just too much information going on, right? So they block it out. And I was like, well, I didn't realize that was an ADHD related thing. I always thought that was an anxiety related thing. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to like override that sense basically, so that all I'm being affected by is the music. And then that way, I don't get burned out, I guess would be a way to say it. Because it's really really difficult to process everything all at once, all the time. And it's like overrunning your computer, overclocking your computer to the point where it bursts into flames. And that's kind of how our brain is going. And then the bursting in the flames would be the executive dysfunction, where you literally just stop. It is a fun one. Like I used to call it my screensaver mode because you'd talk to me or you'd ask me something, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to process what it was that just occurred. And you're stuck waiting. it's like the loading circle. It's loading. Just give me a minute. I'll get there. You know. Yeah, that's fun things that we have with ADHD. But because I'm being able to be exposed to these different communities of people who have it. Like I'm getting to hear about these things. And like another thing is, um, I think it's like a nerve thing. But you're either like really really hot or really really cold, and it feels like there's no in between. And with me, most of the time, I had when they switched my medications from all the antidepressants that I was on to proper bipolar medications and other medications that didn't cause significant weight gain, I actually lost 80 pounds. And after that, and I've kept it off now for 2 years, 3 years, still working on maybe getting better, but yeah, like I lost 80 pounds, and after that, I couldn't get warm anymore. I'm cold all the time, and I almost have to like reset my system because I'll go and I'll just get increasingly colder, and no matter how much clothes I put on, I just keep getting colder. And until eventually I climb into what feels like a hot bath, but it's really a lukewarm bath. Um, and that seems to like, oh, shock the nervous system, and it's like, oh, this is the temperature we should be, right? And it starts working properly again for a little while. All right, I used to get burning hot all the time. I call them like hot flashes. I've been having them, I don't know, since my 20s. I'd be having like these hot flashes. Now I'm just like constantly cold. It's like I don't understand what's happening. But my feet will still do that. And they'll feel hot to the touch. And it's like, but how are my calves cold to the touch? But anyway, I digress. So, like, temperature control is one of the issues that people are having. Um, and it's not like we can really do anything about it. We can't tell our brains, hey, you're setting it for the wrong temperature. Like what are you doing? Um, but something else I've noticed, at least with me, is it's almost like the nerves get overwhelmed and they just stop. So, like, for example, like I also have fibromyalgia, which means my nerve endings are basically telling my brain, hey, something happened, I'm in pain, when there's no cause, per se. But, like, the pain is there, the pain is real, except it has no cause. It's only there because the nerves are saying it's there, right? It's sort of like phantom leg syndrome, Like, you lose your leg below the knee and you can still feel your foot. Um, my dad had that problem. He said it was constantly in pain, and he's like, how am I supposed to medicate for something that's no longer attached? You know? But yeah, it's like that's what it feels like. It's yeah. But but anyway, yeah. So it seems like the nerves get sort of overworked because like this is just like an incredible feeling. It's like, oh, and all I'm doing is touching my arm, right? But it's like my nerves are so happy with that. And that other times, like, I can cut myself and never even feel it. I go banging into things and end up with huge bruises, never even feel it. So it's like I either feel it as like super ecstasy or I don't feel it at all. Like I don't understand. I guess it's not super ecstasy, but like super sensitive. You're super responsive to it, right? So I guess it's a probably a good thing that most of the time I don't hurt myself when everything's like that. It's like I don't want a very sensitive nerve ending day and then like hurt myself and the pain would be excruciating, right? Like I don't know. I don't know. But like all these things are people with ADHD are experiencing these types of things. And it's exciting now that we can talk to each other and find out like I'm not alone in this, right? So it's just cool. It's not things that are like officially added in the diagnosis list of like this is how you can tell it's ADHD. It just seems to be things that many of us are experiencing, and they're doing all kinds of different studies. Um, I can't remember the particular name for the nerve thing, but yeah, like there's I believe it's sympathetic nervous system, like it's hypersensitivity syndrome. Yeah, it's ADHD hypersensitivity syndrome, and it's like you're just super sensitive to everything. Um, but it's the same with like taste, and it's the same with like sound, and you're getting overwhelmed with all the information, and it becomes very difficult to to do things like to be out in crowds and to be in places that are loud, because there are like restaurants that I've gone to where they have like the warehouse style ceilings where it's like beams and stuff, and they're high ceilings and it's all like metal, and those places echo, and it can be difficult to carry on a conversation if you have hearing issues. um but it becomes overwhelmingly just like abrasive to be in a place like that. And it's frustrating that I have to put on the noise canceling headphones to have lunch with all my friends, but I can't talk to them because of the design of the location. Like, it's just. mm, some of the symptoms can be incredibly frustrating. Um, and it's really just working through it and finding ways to work with your issues. And like unfortunately my conditions like feed off of each other. So the bipolar and the ADHD, they make things difficult. And when my bipolar is swinging towards like the manic side, my ADHD symptoms increase, which just furthers the descent into madness, right? Um, so it's like it's very tempting to just pull away from the world and be by yourself. And I mean as everybody knows, like it can be very lonely um to have to pull away from the world in order to feel okay, right? But I mean like there are many things about ADHD that can make it like they're really good qualities. Typically people with ADHD are really good at organization. We're really good at setting up like symptoms that work for people, and we're really bad for using it ourselves. And we can't organize ourselves. Because that would be like trying to organize your own thoughts, and that's not really something we can do. So organizing our own stuff is difficult because we have trouble with importance, and that's not just in the visual or the audio or anything like that. Like that, we simply have trouble with placing priorities and importance on things. Like if you gave me two tasks and didn't give me a due date, like when do you want them? Because I'm probably going to wait till the night before and do them. They'll be great when I get them done, but like I don't have enough information to do this. It's it's aggravating and frustrating to have like ADHD. Just because like if you can't find a way, like a system that works for you, you're stuck drowning in the excess, right? And there are all kinds of different issues that people with ADHD have. Like we have problems with time. And it's like, oh, the hell does that mean? But it's not that we have problems with time management. We simply have problems with time, you know? Which probably doesn't make any sense. But it's like, I can sit here and watch a 5-minute video and like 4 hours has passed, and it's like, how? How? Right? And if it didn't happen yesterday or today, I literally could not tell you when is in the past this happened. You know, 'cause- and things are problems with time are further complicated by the fact that my husband's been a shift worker for a very long time. So he'll be like 4 days on, 4 days off. You know, 2 days these days, 2 days these nights. So his schedule's all over the place. So days of the week literally mean nothing to me. So I don't like. I have it on my watch. I have it on my phone. It's the only reason I could tell you. Because like I don't know the day of the week. I don't know what today was. I don't know what yesterday was. Like I don't know the date. Um like I can't grasp it. And time in really any form is difficult to grasp. Um so it's hard to pinpoint things unless you have something that pinpoints it, right? And we also have problems. There's a term for it, but I can't remember what it is. Oh, go figure. But it's basically out of sight, out of mind, right? Everybody's heard out of sight, out of mind. But if I don't see it, it's not there, right? So that's one of the reasons why we look so messy and chaotic a lot of the time. Is because if I put something away, like not only would I not know where it's put away, but like I'm never going to think about it again ever, right? It's the ultimate out of sight. It's object permanence. That's the term. We have problems with object permanence. Not necessarily everybody with ADHD, but a lot of us do. Um, and yeah, it's out of sight, out of mind. But it doesn't just apply to belongings, right? Like, I have this bag of chips, right? It's my favorite. If I were to put this in the cupboard instead of sitting on my desk, I would never know that I have a bag of chips, right? Which, not necessarily a bad thing. Then you're not eating it. But it's like that with literally everything. So, some people with ADHD would have problems with like hoarding, right? Because you buy an item, you forget you buy it, and you just keep buying that item. because you think you need it. Like one time, back in Manitoba many, many years ago, so it was probably 15 years ago now, I remember my husband said we needed to buy bacon. And I am incredibly bad at making grocery lists. And when I have a list, I can't bring a list and use it. Um, so it doesn't help. But I remembered he told me we need bacon, right? And eventually he told me, stop buying the bacon. Because at that point we had 20 packages of bacon in our freezer. I didn't know. He said he needed bacon. I can't tell you when he said he needed bacon. He just said he needed bacon. And my brain remembered that and would just keep remembering it, and I would keep buying the bacon every time I went to the store until he said stop. And then I had to try really, really hard to not buy any more bacon. And it's the same. I've done that so many times. I do that with bread. I do that with milk. I do that with the coffee. I do that with the bacon, obviously. But I've done that so many times where my brain is like, I remembered. I need to pick up, and I'll just keep picking it up. And I can't see it because it's not in front of me, right? If I went to the fridge and looked in the fridge, I would see it's there. But you can't do that when you're in a grocery store. Your fridge isn't there, right? So I have a lot of problems with object permanence and being able to remember things, right? But object permanence doesn't just apply to objects, right? But you would think it does because it's object permanence. But that's just sort of the term. It applies to relationships. It applies to people. It applies to grief. Um, it applies to a lot of things. And it's once you've opened the door, it is there. But okay, so with the problems of time, problems with object permanence, we moved provinces in 2014, however long that was ago. And so for me, all my friends there, that's how they exist. And if I see pictures of them now, it actually makes me very uncomfortable because that's not what they look like, right? Because I haven't seen them, my brain can't seem to process that they exist without me. You know, it sounds weird, but it's it's not just friends, it's family, it's all kinds of things. And it's people complain that I never call them. There are two reasons. Reason number one, I have really bad anxiety about calling people simply because in the past, people don't speak in a way that I understand, so I don't understand they can't actually speak right now. And it has led to issues in the past where people get mad or they get frustrated or, I get yelled at or whatever. So I feel uncomfortable calling people because I don't want to be a bother or cause any problems. I figure when they want to talk to me, they'll call me. Now that is only when I remember that they exist. And that sounds wrong, but there isn't really a better way to say it. Because unless you pop into my head, which does occasionally happen, it doesn't occur to me, right? It doesn't occur to me. So my mom will call me, and it's oh, she just called me not too long ago, and then she mentions that she's sorry that it's been 6 months. And I was like, nah, you just called me a little while ago. And she's like, no, it's been 6 months. And I was like, doesn't seem right. Right? And she asked if I talked to other family members and stuff, when was the last time you talked to these people? And I can't tell you when the last time I talked to those people, but my mother is definitely the person I talked to the most on the phone who was not either a doctor, my pharmacist, who I call a lot, he's great, I love him, or there is a elderly lady in New Brunswick who accidentally calls me 4 times a year, 4 or 5 times a year, every year since 2016. She just misdials every once in a while, and now we actually have a conversation. So I guess aside from the lady from the New Brunswick, my mom is the one I talk to the most, but it never occurs to me to call anybody because I don't think of them. And that can lead to problems and cause a lot of anxiety and issues when something changes. When was it? It was okay, 2020, so last year. Um, in January, I had flown back to Manitoba to visit with my dad. He was dying, and I was able to see him and interact with him uh, before he passed away. He passed away, I think it was a few days after I flew back because I don't remember when I flew back. Um, but yeah, I I knew he had passed away. I didn't attend the funeral because um, I couldn't fly back there again. Uh, and then like COVID was hitting and everything, but so I didn't attend the funeral. But I'm not sure that would have helped because this happens with everybody. I forgot he was dead. I just forgot that he passed away. And I'd be sitting outside having a cigarette, or I'd be, like standing around my kitchen and I'd be like, oh, I should really call dad, which is something I said to myself a lot when he was alive as well. And I'd be like, it's 3 a.m. though, he wouldn't appreciate that. I'll try and remember at a better time. And then a few minutes later, it would hit me. And it was like just getting the news that he had passed away. It hit you just like that. Because if you can't remember that someone is like there, right? If you can't remember that somebody is there, or you can't put together that somebody is there, when they pass away, or like if you have a relationship, if you break up and stuff, like that raw feeling and like the pain is there. You forget, or with us, that information's gone. So when you throw it back at us, it's like suddenly remembering. Now you've opened the jar on this grief, or on these issues, right? You've opened them. Um, and like once you've reopened that, it's just as raw as it was. So now you're dealing with this emotion that you should have had then. But it's like your brain just went, we'll put a pause on that. And so grief in its raw form can last for years, and it's not healthy. It's not a healthy way to be. And like people with ADHD, like we know that, but there's very little you can do about it. And like I remember when my grandmother died, she was my maternal grandmother. It took me probably 5 or 6 years to remember that she was gone and she was passed. And it was painful every time I forgot because you hate yourself and you're like, how could you forget something like that? Like, how could you forget that you broke up with somebody? Or how could you forget that this person passed away? Right? And it's just, it's our brains, right? This is not really our fault, but we still beat ourselves up about it. And it's just, it becomes impossible. It becomes an impossible situation because, like, how can you constantly remind yourself without causing yourself additional pain? It's tricky, right? I didn't want to go through with my dad what I went through with my grandmother, simply because I couldn't remember they were gone, right? So I had an idea. Now, my dad and I, we had an interesting relationship. Um, maybe I'll go into that more in other videos. But a lot of our communication, remember, with like ADHD, we mirror back and forth. So the way he communicated at me would be the way I communicated at him, or vice versa. So a lot of our communication was done yelling and screaming at each other. And like he went through a lot of different parenting courses and stuff like that just because like he was interested in it, and it was pertained to the work that he was doing. Um, and so he try out these new techniques like active listening, and he try all these different parenting things, and I became terrified of him because what you did is you took a program that I knew and you've completely changed the rules to it, and I don't know how to function anymore. Um, so we communicated best when we were screaming, and that's just how we were. And when I was young, he worked at a scout camp. He was very active with scouts, as long as he was physically able. And they called him Bear because he's growly, right? He gets angry. He's growly. They called him Bear. Um, and with me back then, I was a little bit more able to vocalize emotions and process emotions back then. So they called me Cub because I would yell back, right? So we were Bear and Cub. And I loved that. And that's one of my fondest memories of my dad is spending time with him in the kitchen at the scout camp at Camp Alloway in Manitoba. And that was like my fondest memories, right? And so when my dad passed away, um, we all got like a small inheritance, despite the fact that all of us had just spent it on yourself. Well, you're still here. Go do something fun, spend it on yourself. But he still put aside money for us and gave us money. And I came up with something that I thought was perfect for both like how dad and I were with each other and how we communicated with each other, and just like the attitude we always had to each other. Like, we loved each other, do not get me wrong. We loved each other. We were both shit at communicating. But so what I got was on my arm, where I can see it, I tattooed two bears. And I'll see if I can angle the camera a bit to get it. These are my bears. This one is for my father. And if you see, he is growling. He is loud. And then this one is me. And I'm yelling back. And then here, this is our family motto. If you can't read it, it says gang warily. It means tread carefully. And my husband interpreted it as like be wise in your steps, right? And I said, are you familiar with the Drummond temper? I said, I think it's a warning. You're supposed to tread carefully. So yeah, I have the family motto because my brother has the family crest on his arm. So I got the motto, and I got these two bears to sort of honor my father. And I can see it every day. And because I'm constantly exposing this one, well, damn it, constantly exposing this one, um, and having my sleeves up, and I cannot just have one sleeve up. Like I see it every day, and I think of my dad every day, and I think of the happy times and the happy memories with my dad. And I think that he would have at least liked that part. Now, a thing about my father, he hated piercings and tattoos. And I got a tattoo in memoriam. So I figured he probably would have laughed at that, sort of like a last FU on his way out the door. But like things can be so difficult and raw with people who have ADHD, just because it's so complex and it affects you in so many ways. Like myself, I have a lot of trauma in my past, and I have a lot of bad situations that I was involved in, and it's very hard for me to process those things and deal with those things in a healthy manner uh, when most of the time they don't exist. It makes it very difficult. But on a more like everyday kind of person type thing, um, I can't put my clothes away because if I put my clothes in the closet, I forget. Never go in the closet. Why would I go in the closet? For us, you have to move past a fan to get to the closet. You know, it's not worth it. So I never go in the closet, and so that's where clothes go to die. And I will end up with multiples of things. And I will go out and buy new tank tops simply because I'd put them in the drawer and now I can't find them. And I end up with like piles of clothes. And it's like, how does this happen? Because it shouldn't, right? In an effort to be more streamlined, all my bottoms are black, with the uh, rare exception, because black is easy. It goes with everything, right? And on that note, um, almost all my accessories, like sweaters, are black because they go with everything. you know, and yeah, so like I usually get colored shirts and things like that, and like today it's a gray shirt, right? That's not black. But I end up wearing like all black. Now imagine my piles of clothes that are all black, and I keep getting new things because I don't seem to have any of that. Like, it's the weirdest thing. Every fall, I have to go buy a bunch of socks. Because I haven't been wearing them since winter ended. You don't really need them in spring here. And they're just all gone. Now, I know they didn't, like, physically disappear into another dimension, but where are they? I can't find them. And that's a funny thing that's been like that all my life. Um, yeah, I think clothes is the biggest object permanence problem I have. Like putting clothes away and not being able to find them is the biggest problem I've had, and I've had it literally all my life. And I know that because we had a fire in our shed when I was a kid, And I was really proud of myself because I was able to actually like buckle down and get a task done that day. And I had washed all my clothes and put them away. And so there is a fire behind our house, and my mother says, "You have to get out of the house." I was like, "Okay." And I'm scrambling around my room as fast as I can, trying to find any clothes, any scrap of clothes. Where are all my clothes, right? So I run out of the house in a towel. That's it. One of the firemen gave me his coat. I think I was like 10, stark naked, in a towel, standing out on the street. Couldn't find my clothes. It was a high pressure situation. I didn't have long enough to look. And you'll look at the dresser and you're like, yeah, it's a dresser. But it's almost like your brain doesn't understand that if you pull on that thing, you get something that holds your clothes. I was like, So I mean, like sometimes ADHD can be funny. It can be funny to people, and it can be funny to us too. But in the moment, it's so frustrating. It's like, come on, brain, just literally any help, anything you can do. This is your job, you know? I was like, you have one job and you're failing at it. But yeah, so like ADHD can be very interesting and very tricky. And a lot of my conditions they sort of like meld into each other, and like some things um like as I said with the wearing of headphones and listening to musics and different playlists and stuff like that, like anxiety can do like require the same kind of treatment or coping mechanism, and so a lot of them like play off of each other and blur together. So it's like I can't always say for certain like this is definitely caused by this, but yeah, like ADHD is a very diverse thing, and there seems to be such varying I don't know, like strengths of it. It's just severities. That's the word. Like there's such variable severities to ADHD, and the different things that we're finding and the different things that we're beginning to understand are quite good. And yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things about ADHD that are frustrating. There's lots of things that are cool. There are things that, like it makes us more more likely to become like entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs because we constantly want to be on top of things, and we're constantly, you know, doing things at a quicker pace because our brain works very fast. But doesn't necessarily portray that information quickly. Um, so that can be a challenge. It's like the challenge is more the talking or the output. But like our brains work very very fast, and they say people with ADHD are usually highly intelligent. Um, so I mean, like there's lots of good in ADHD, just like same with other uh, conditions. You'll find good and bad in them. Um, but I'm just excited about where we are and what kind of world we're in now, because, like I said, even just back in 1991, it was just like a learning disability, right? And there was no effort for people to understand or um, assist us or allow us to adapt, right? It was just a demand that we do what everyone else is doing. And now there's a lot more understanding and a lot more liberties being made to people who have ADHD. Um, you know, so I mean, like it's a good thing when you can work with people. It is a good thing. And like for me personally, like I love to do things that are at the computer. I've always loved to do like um, clerical work or receptionist work or things like that, and I love to do that. But but like the multitude of different conditions that I have, the way they play off each other, and the level of uh, impairment can be quite severe at times. So like I don't get to necessarily flex that too much. But I love working with an Ishikaros. It allows me to be creative and create a variety of different things in a variety of different ways, and being able to juggle all the different products and things that I'm making and the different ways that I'm making things. Like that is the ultimate job for someone like me. And I'm excited now that we're going to be coming out with like different videos and stuff. Mary's been doing some planning. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing videos like this is so that I can work on the editing and I can, get things more polished and try and have it just like a bit more comprehensive for people. And also I get to tell what's going on with me so that more people can see that and understand. And I think that's a good thing too, right? So I hope you enjoyed. And if you want to learn more about ADHD, I highly recommend going to TikTok and saying like hashtag ADHD, uh, and just scroll through them because there are some great, great people on there um, explaining or like breaking things down, giving tips, trying to assist people. Like it is definitely the place to go. Because if you Google, you're just going to end up with like articles that all basically say the same thing, or medical websites that literally all say the same thing that are very unhelpful. And they just tell you the bare bone of this. And they don't cover anything past that. And there is just so much more that is affected. Um, that like people just don't understand. Like people don't understand why I'm late. I don't know why I'm late. I left at the time that I thought I needed to leave at. By the time I got to my car, I'd lost 10 minutes somehow. And then I'm driving there and a 15-minute drive took me an hour. Like I don't know why I'm late. you know. So it's like, yeah, whatever. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, look forward to more of the list coming up. Or is it this way? Might be this way. This way. The list. But yeah, I look forward to talking about it.